Welcome to the first installment of the Farzad Misbahi Forum of Patreon people, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about what the community wants to talk about, what our community here and on our channel wants to talk about. And this is a forum where we're all going to sit down, share ideas, talk about those ideas to get some insight into what the Tesla community internationally, abroad, the entire globe, is thinking about and wants to talk about. So this is my way to try and bring different voices within the community to have these kinds of discussions. And we're starting with my Patreon members. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, and obviously everyone else out there that has been supporting the channel. But I'm very, very excited to sit down and have these discussions because I think we're going to have a lot of different varying degrees of ideas and commentary, I think, from folks that perhaps don't have a platform like some of us YouTubers have. This is my way to try and bring more voices into the fold that could add different ideas, different opinions, and perhaps bring some light bulb moments for all of us to think about as we continue on this journey of watching Tesla and Elon and companies like those transform the world. So I'm very excited to get the discussion started with the group here. So we'll start with I'll throw out a name, and then if you don't mind, introduce yourself, how you came about Tesla, how you found Tesla, and maybe a little bit of a story, where you're from, and anything else you'd like to add. So we'll start with the first one here. We'll start with Kuba, since you're upper left corner here for me. Let's go ahead and give you the mic.
Yeah, so I'm Kuba. I live in Poland. I'm 36 years old, former programmer and turned business owner. I now run a software company with 40 odd people. I learned about Tesla quite early on because in the IT circles it was also quite popular, even when they started with the Roadster back in the day. But in terms of investing myself, I started buying my first Tesla shares in 2019, just around the Cybertruck unveil. And I got the first lesson that still is valid till this day, that when you try to play for an event and then expect the price of the shares to go up, it usually goes down after the event. It seems to be true with very few exceptions from my experience in those past almost 3 years. So unfortunately, I wasn't as wise to keep the shares from 2019. I was trading on and off, so I'm not a millionaire yet, but hopefully that would change now that I'm wiser in the next few years.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Danny, we'll have you go next.
Hey, I'm Danny Eakins. I'm a process and facilities engineer. I own Elevated Automation. What got me into Tesla? I just love, obviously, with what I do with automation and everything, I absolutely love all things automation. And then there was some random dude named Elon out in California putting a electric vehicle together, and I was like, I'm rooting for him, I really am. But man, if there's one thing that we've seen in the past is once they get started, they just kind of fizzle out. And then what really got me going was SpaceX and following rockets. I've always loved the Apollo program, space shuttle. I've always that's actually where we went on our honeymoon when I got married. Seems like a whole other life ago. But so we went to the Kennedy Space Center. That was super inspiring. But a lot of what Elon says, I felt the same way, that it's like, well, what are we doing now, guys? Like, we went to the moon how long ago? And anyway, when it comes getting back to Tesla, I really started thinking about investing a little bit into it. I think it was late 2019 to 2020. Should have done it. Totally didn't do it, but got into it. Honestly, right about when Farzad came onto the scene, I was like, well, I'll throw some money in there and get going on it. So I'm probably the one that's got the least amount of shares out of everybody, but boy, am I passionate about automation. And Elon is definitely, he definitely has some good ideas that I can get behind 100%.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that. Radman, we'll go with you next.
Hey, my name is Rodman.
Rodman, I'm so sorry.
That's all good. It's all good. I'm a former software engineer. I left my company in about 2007, and I was doing some lead stuff, and I'd always been really passionate about investing. I was like trying to get my group, like I would always try to get them, like in their 401ks and stuff like that, and like talking to people about investing. And I was personally interested. I left my company and I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And I was like, I'd already like kind of set up like sort of a foundation for investing. And so I've been investing since then. I first got into Tesla, like, you hear a little bit about like Elon starting SpaceX, like this was back in the 2000s, and like he was building the Roadster, and you'd see like articles about it. But like, it was like, oh, you can actually take an electric car and you can drive from LA to Las Vegas. And that was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And I had another friend from the same company, and he was like, he was also an investor. And I talked to him over chat, and I was like, so what are you still invested in? And he was like, well, I sold everything. I'm not investing anymore, but I kept Tesla. And I was like, you're keeping Tesla? Like this company, they don't have a product. And I was like, okay. But it put it on my radar. And like, I moved to the East Coast in 2008. And then I moved back in 2012. And that was like about the period the Model S started coming out. And I was back here in LA, and like the Model S was hot. I mean, it was the it car, and LA is it's a city about the it car to have. And so when I saw this thing selling, I was like, okay, it's time to like start like my friend had put like Tesla in my mind. And then I was like, so I just bought a little bit. And then over time, like Tesla became like just Elon became a bigger thing. He released the Hyperloop, like he had that paper about it. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then, XKCD, like they had like a little thing on like Elon, and like it just started like bubbling up. And we finally just tried to test drive a car in like 2017, maybe. And like that was right before the Model 3. Like we were all interested in it. And then my brother-in-law got one. He put his name, like he was one of those people who like put his name in for reservation without it, like without even seeing the car, right? And then we were wowed by like the test drive. And then like he bought one in 2018, like he had one of the first 5,000 cars. And then I bought one like right before the end of the year, before the tax credit like exited. And then like that was like the game changer for me. Like when I sat in that car and I was like, oh my God, this is like it's like an iPhone for like as a car, right? That was like, okay, I'm all in on this. I was like listening to podcasts about it. I like started listening to Tesla Daily, Galley, like, and then like, once I like really like firmed up like what this company was going to do, I was like, okay, I'm just going to start dumping money in. And that was like by far my biggest investments, like in 2018 and 2019. And then like, after the Cybertruck hit, like it just kind of shot up, and it's been great since then. Yeah, so
awesome. Thank you very much. And then last but not least, we'll have Andreas, if you want to go next, and maybe after you're done introducing yourself, kick us off with the first topic that we'll discuss as well. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Farzad. So yeah, my name's Andreas. I'm based in South Africa, in Johannesburg. And I mean, I've been in tech I started coding since I was 10. So I got a bit of a misplaced childhood there. And I founded one of the founders of a technology and analytics firm. So, very into tech and analytics. But I suppose I got wind of Tesla and Elon in around 2010, 2011, because I studied aerospace engineering. And it was SpaceX actually that drew my attention. I probably should have I felt pretty embarrassed not knowing about them much sooner, given that I'd studied aerospace engineering and that Elon was from South Africa and so on. But nonetheless, that then led me to see Tesla, and I got really interested in Tesla. And it was super frustrating because being in South Africa, it was very hard to become a Tesla customer, right? So the first Tesla, I had the app embarrassingly on my phone with no products on it, right? Just to have the app, and I can share it with this group, but other people would think like, yeah, what's wrong with you, And in about 2016, the Powerwall was launched here, so I was one of the first adopters of the Powerwall 1 here in South Africa with solar panels. But in 2014, we went overseas, went to Germany, and to my wife's dismay, like top on my priority was to get a test drive in the Model S, which had just been launched there. So so that was amazing, right? It just met all expectations, and expectations were super high. So I think I started investing around 2016, 2017. And even since then, I mean, it will be a while, obviously, since the vehicles will launch here in South Africa, given the supply constraint. It doesn't make sense to move into new markets for some time still. But whenever we go abroad, I'm always super keen to test drive, and I never miss the opportunity to do so, or actually hire. Now, I mean, it's been great that you can actually hire a Tesla now properly. So that's a brief summary. I haven't sold any shares. I've just been accumulating as we go along. I mean, I was kind of tested when it hit 900 about a year ago for the first time. It's like, do I sell? Don't I? And I had to make an in-principle decision that, I'm in it for the long term. I still fundamentally believe in the firm. It's better off than what it was when I first invested. So just stay in, right? And now with the cutback, I'm just using it as opportunity to buy more shares. And I suppose, Farzad, that brings me to one of the topics, which is, if you invest, certainly if you invested early in Tesla and it's appreciated, 10x, 20x, whatever the numbers might be, it can end up being a significant portion of your net assets, right? And if you then still have money to invest, the question is, what are you invested in? And from my standpoint, it's very difficult to justify investing it in any other investment instrument, for the simple reason that the way I see Tesla as it stands today, its current valuation, even as of a month ago, let alone where it is today, is justified based on the core business, right? Based on manufacturing vehicles at a 30% GP and growing at 50, 60, 70% year on year. And to be honest, even if Elon, it seems to me, is not part of that core business, it still justifies the valuation that's there. So it's, from that perspective, it's a safe investment, right? On the other hand, it's got a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50x, depending who you speak to, upside. So the question is, what other investment instrument is pretty safe, has got a proven track record, can justify its current value, and yet has a pretty tangible 50x upside, right? And when I say tangible, you may say, well, look, the optimist ain't going to make it. The probability of succeeding is not. But the point is, you can articulate a clear story and put numbers to that path, right? So then it becomes very difficult, because if you look at your portfolio from a portfolio perspective, putting all your eggs in one basket makes no sense. But on the other hand, what do you do? Do you diversify in other instruments where it's a suboptimal investment, and you have to sit by and watch Tesla perform better over the years whilst your other investments don't? And so I've really been grappling with this, and I'd love to get additional perspectives on this issue.
That's a phenomenal question. Who would like to go first?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So, to me, what you're articulating is that putting having a strong investment in one company, making it a large part of your portfolio, is a risk, right? And then, people will tell you, well, you have to mitigate that risk, and they'll tell you that's diversification, right? But the thing that I feel about that is that there are multiple ways to mitigate any risk. Okay, so my way I mitigate my risk by having a concentrated portfolio is I do research, right? And I have a mentality for what happens when it's not performing the way I want it, which it's doing now, right? So one is keep an eye on the long time horizon, right? And what the company is, right? So if you feel like your company that you're investing in still has great potential, you can kind of mitigate that by, making sure that you really understand what that company is doing and that you're reevaluating constantly. But once you sell, or once there's a short-term issue and you sell, right, you've suddenly like kind of committed yourself to like to losing, to having a losing asset on your portfolio. So yeah, I think, as long as you're in it for the long term and you see that the company is still performing well, like just stay in there and it's not going to be a problem. But the problem is, there are always other risks that you have to like evaluate. It's like, the common ones are, what if Elon leaves or something worse happens to him? Those are things that are a little bit harder to control. And then, the counter to that I hear is, well, Tesla's already been set up on a good path forward. And even if Elon's there, it's going to perform like a certain amount, whether he's there or not. So I think he's already put in, like the foundations and set the car moving in the right direction. So even without Elon, it's going to do well. It's just not as well as if it was there. But yeah, that's kind of how I think about the concentrated portfolio issue. What do you guys think?
And on that note, with something I've been thinking a lot about, and we can touch more on this later and stick to more investing. But one thought about Elon, and we want him to take care of himself and we want him to stick around for a while. But I've been really stuck on the DSM, the digital self-management of Tesla. And it's like, man, that I've nicknamed the dang thing. It's like FSD for, oh my goodness, the like Giga Texas or Giga China or whatever. I mean, it really is the autopilot of Tesla. And the more information we get on it from an engineer's perspective, well, we can get more into that later. But to me, there's so many things that Elon, it's like Farzad always says. I mean, most people are playing in 2D. Elon's playing 3D and like 3D chess. I mean, the guy is brilliant. And you better believe he's putting in some measures into that company that are making it to where he doesn't have to be as involved in every decision. I mean, the very definition of the DSM is that people can just self-manage and just check in with the digital self-management and say, was that a good decision? Was that a bad decision? Are we making more money? Are we not making more money? Okay, well, that wasn't good. Let's go back to what was good.
Kuba, any thoughts on what Andreas mentioned?
What resonates with me in that respect is I think most of us or all of us watch Stephen Mark Ryan as well from Solving the Money Problem.
Who is that?
And he always says that there's certainly going to be some investments in the stock market in like 10 years or further that will gain more than Tesla, but there's possibly none that you have more confidence that this is likely to gain a lot. So that's more or less what Andreas said, and that's very true for me. So I also grapple with this, and the only other sizable investments that I have is Bitcoin that I have has a similar potential in terms of upside, but obviously it's well, depending who you ask, it's either purely speculative or it has some also utility. I will see. But this the black swans are what worries me, right? Say a war with China or something happening to Elon, or I don't know what else can happen. So that's the biggest risk. But so maybe you should diversify into something completely different. But then there's this risk that you just see that your money is not working as well as it should. So that's then some work that you have to do on your mentality to accept that and know why you're doing it. And that might be difficult because all of us are accustomed to like pretty chunky gains every year. And one interesting strategy that I recently started looking into is to diversify into uranium, because it seems like we'll have to go heavy into nuclear power for at least in the transitionary period before we can produce enough batteries to stabilize the solar powered grid. And yeah, so I have a few interesting friends that are heavy into commodities, and uranium seems to be an interesting pick, and it sort of balances out the heavy concentration on solar and batteries with Tesla.
That's actually a great point, Cuba, because it's very, you know, when it comes to looking at commodities, it's very easy to say, well, let's focus on all the battery orientated commodities, right? Like nickel, copper, cobalt, etc. But uranium doesn't.
Basket.
Yeah, exactly. And as you say, it's a complete diversification because you're not reliant on the rate of adoption of electric vehicles at that point. That's a very, very cool perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that's very unique, and I think it's yet another sort of cool way that you can invest in emerging future high potential technologies or commodities or whatever that are loosely tied to the trends that are happening. I think the one thing that was brought up was like, for example, my investments are, so 80% of our investments is essentially split in half between real estate and Tesla, probably less than Tesla now since the last few weeks here. But it's, it's, and the way I think about my Tesla investments is, the way I think about my investments that are non-Tesla, it's purely a way for me to hedge against the risk of owning Tesla from the perspective of Elon's health and some sort of catastrophic thing that could happen. But I'm also accepting the fact that I'm likely going to miss out on outsized gains on those investments. So like basically the exercise I've done for myself is like, I know that this percentage of my money, I'm not going to make that much money on it, but I'm doing it just in case. It's just an acceptance of I'm not going to have as much money as I could have had. And that's it. And I don't know if that's a proper rationalization or not, but that's how I think about it. Mainly, maybe just like in a greedy way to just like tell myself that it's okay that I invested, that I didn't go 100% into Tesla before. It's like, well, yeah, you never know what's going to happen. But I view it purely as just a way to try and stay grounded, and perhaps in a different way, it forces me to not be always thinking about Tesla 24/7, because if I don't force myself to do it, I will not do it. Right. And that's maybe another mechanism that I have, that it forces me to step outside the Tesla bubble from time to time and get exposed to different things that are going on that could either be very complementary or whatever else. Like, for example, the real estate example that we have, all our real estate is in Austin, Texas. And the timing we had of it, we basically mortgaged the properties when we got into Austin, and the rate of growth for those properties, if you compare the appreciation of the real estate versus the loans that we took out against them, is very similar, if not bigger, than the growth we had in our Tesla investment, because of how crazy the Austin real estate has been. But it becomes a question of, okay, so how in the next 5 years is that still going to be the case? And if Tesla has the sort of the runway that it's set up for itself for the next 3 to 5 years, then Tesla is very likely to dramatically outsize the rest of our investment portfolio. So that's how I think about it. I don't know if it's any helpful, but like sometimes I go to my wife and I jokingly say, why don't we just sell everything, buy Tesla, buy an RV, and just live in an RV for the next 5 years, and then retire on Mars, like 10 years from now. And that's like a legitimate potential investment strategy if you're somebody who really believes in Tesla, like just liquidate everything, dump it all into Tesla, and just wait, right? But then the opposite conversation becomes, well, okay, but what are you giving up in order to do that? Right? Are you giving up the ability to leverage your real estate properties for something else? Maybe, I don't know, maybe you're going to donate one of them to one of your family members where they retire, right? There's like a bunch of different factors that also go into the conversation. So it's like, how much of your daily life or what you want to do as a human being are you willing to give up to invest into Tesla? So I also view it through that lens. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I think for me, what's super useful, two things. One is there's no shortcut. You need to mentally prepare yourself. Like, you got to make a choice and then mentally prepare yourself for the alternative, and just stop comparing, right? If you say I'm going to take 20% of my assets, put them in a diversified option, then it's a conscious choice. And I think as a Tesla investor, you have to mentally prepare yourself anyway, given the volatility of the stock, right? You can't always worry about where it's going. So it's kind of taking that discipline and applying it. But I think the other nice angle is if you're excited about what the alternative is, like if it's a uranium investment, and you can, that makes it equally interesting, right? And so I like that, because you see, part of my thinking was, well, let me look at crypto. But you see, for me, crypto as it stands now seems like I've got some money in Bitcoin. It's very hard to make a case around Bitcoin going 10x. It could, but it had peaked at $1 trillion market cap. It's going to go to 10 trillion. It's now significantly larger than gold potentially. It's difficult to see the mechanism, and a lot of stars have to align. Whereas with Tesla, you can quite easily articulate a 10x, right? So from that respect, it's been super useful for me, because I haven't had to worry about stressing about missing on the next crypto wave. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not, I can have fun with crypto, playing around here and there, just trading. But as a long-term investment, I don't have to stress about that. And the question is then, what's the alternative? But yeah, Kuba, I think you're onto something. The uranium is, you've given me stuff to do over the weekend.
Well, I honestly, I put a little bit of money in uranium, and it did very well for a while there. And I mean, even Elon himself is saying, like, in regards to like Germany, he's like, I beg of you guys, like, it's critical that you reopen your nuclear mines. Like, you guys are crazy for shutting them down. And especially, I mean, he said it before the whole Russian side of things, and now especially with, I mean, at this point, it's a national security decision to not have nuclear power at your disposal. I mean, if you have the technology, use it. And then, I mean, I even remember a story of when there was some issues out in Japan or whatnot with, I think there was like a tsunami or something. And Elon went over and just ate a cheeseburger, like right there by the nuclear power plant, and was like, we're good. Like, just so we can calm the hysteria. It's safe, people. Like, there's all sorts of redundant processes in place that make it safe. And until, obviously, Elon's saying, yes, we can just carve out a little corner of Utah or Nevada and put all of the solar panels, and we could power the entire United States. But until we get there, nuclear is our best option. I mean, we're not putting more carbon into the atmosphere that way, and we're not relying on oil and coal and all that good stuff. So I completely agree with uranium right now, in my opinion.
There's a fantastic TED talk of someone who was very, very anti-nuclear, very pro the traditional alternative energies, and he talks about his journey to supporting nuclear, and it's very fact-based, and talks about the grossly exaggerated dangers and impacts that Chernobyl and Fukushima had, and so on, right? So, yeah, it's really worth seeing, and yeah, I'm 100%. I think the Americans need to stop calling it nuclear, perhaps, because that maybe doesn't help with the marketing that much, right? So
probably not.
Yeah.
Let's
funny. Stick with the spelling, right?
That's so funny. I think but the flip side of that is, like, you look at the recent price action for Tesla in the last few months, right? And then you think about the initial question of, okay, so even in the case of uranium, which has a tremendous amount of potential as nuclear becomes more and more accepted, hopefully, as we move forward. If this price action continues and Tesla's path towards increasing cash flows and profitability continue to rise, and then if full self-driving becomes real here in the next, say, 6 to 12 months, like, I feel like the case that you made, Andreas, at the beginning, where it's like, okay, like, where are those, like, where are the investment opportunities that could potentially mirror Tesla? I feel like you go from a 10x from a 50x to potentially 100x, depending where the price is going, right? So I think it's also very dependent on the near-term price movements because of sort of the crazy nature that market that we're living through right now with macro coming down. Now you got this whole craziness with the ESG and the stuff that happened yesterday that came out that Elon's obviously refuting. So like how many of those pressures are going to make that decision you're coming up with even more difficult, or even more towards the angle of, okay, so like Tesla is truly becoming a no-brainer investment, like even it goes from like, hey, the potential is incredible, but the core business is already good, to like the core business is like incredible. You know what I'm saying? Like we're like, at what point does that happen? And what kind of decision-making process will people have that say, okay, like literally this is crazy. I'm curious to see how that plays out as well. And if there's going to be other parties that will join the fray that potentially in the past, they separate out the signal from the noise, hopefully, and they just, again, refocus on the core business, on the company, and they're like, man, this is like, how can we give it up? How can we give it up? I don't know if that will happen. It just seems like the lower we go in the price and the more Tesla continues on its path, like at some point, there's a convergence there, and, I don't know.
I think it might have already started happening, because what happened this quarter, when Toyota announced their results, turned out that Tesla made as much money as Toyota, producing many less cars, right? And so that knocks out the argument of, but Toyota produces 10 million cars a year, so why is Tesla valued more? Because they make more money. It doesn't matter how many cars you produce.
Exactly.
It's not the metric. It matters how much money you make. And it's now becoming abundantly clear, even for the naysayers, that maybe Tesla is a bit more efficient with how they allocate capital, and maybe the higher multiple is warranted, right? So I think that's been one of the first signals for everyone clear in the whole world to see what we're talking about for the past few years.
I love the way that Elon mentions it, is their true product is the factory. Like, it's the machine that builds the machine, and the Teslas, as much as we love them, and as much as they're just absolutely incredible and revolutionizing transportation and everything, I mean, their true product is their factory, and the machine that produces the machines. It's like the cars are just the byproduct of what the true product is.
Yeah, for me, I think the big fear is, I think what's kind of holding the price down, at least amongst Wall Street people, is that, it's still not clear whether, the most past quarters, their profit margins reflect like new prices coming in, like price of lithium has skyrocketed. It's not clear that they'll be able to keep those margins as high as they are. Everything right now reflects the past, and it's not clear yet what the current situation, the current environment for pricing and everything, how that's going to affect the future results. So I think that's like part of what's keeping it down. But on the other hand, like you guys are saying, I think these are all short-term like issues, and like it's clear they have the demand, they have like the pricing power, like they're going to be increasing capacity. Like there's so many things that are like that are going to play out, and despite whatever issues are right now, like it's clear to me from like listening to like Farzad and Joe Justice and like seeing other people talk about how Tesla operates. Tesla is uniquely situated, and they have a unique culture that can respond to these things in real time. It's just like, okay, so we have this problem, but we've been thinking ahead, first of all, right? It's not like Tesla just started thinking about lithium prices. They've been thinking about this. I mean, it's clear to me that they've been thinking about it for at least 10 years, right? And like the people who are having problems, they're the people who just started thinking about it, right? It's like, oh, we're Toyota and we're going to start producing a new electric car this year. Yeah, you're going to have problems with securing, lithium or batteries or whatever, right? So like all these issues that like I think Wall Street has with it, I think they're legitimate, but like Tesla is uniquely like just situated to like prepare for these things. They think ahead. It's not a worry to me.
Someone was going to jump in. I don't know if you still had, I forget who it was. Did somebody else had a comment there?
I was going to jump in, but it was a bit of a derailment. But to Rodman's point, if I can perhaps add to that it is. I mean, it's ironic in some respects. When Tesla first started, they had obviously massive issues securing suppliers, that certainly first class suppliers to source parts from, and whatever the case is. And clearly now they're in completely opposite space, where all the suppliers of batteries and so on ought to favor Tesla. But the double irony there is that they're also scared of Tesla, in that Tesla can really out negotiate and out dominate them. So there's still an incentive for existing suppliers to diversify and not put all their eggs in Tesla's basket. And focus on GM, even though GM may or may not be around, right? So it's quite ironic that they had problems with suppliers when they first started, and it's kind of on the other extreme. It's still not that easy, perhaps, but certainly, they can dominate the market in terms of procurement now.
Yeah, that supply chain issue, like the GM and Ford and everybody else being in the game for 100 years, and you really think about what these manufacturers are, they're really supply chain experts, because they don't really make anything. It's third party everything. So in theory, they're just supply chain experts. And then these supply chain experts are struggling mightily through one of the biggest supply chain shocks in the history of the economy. Yet Tesla is navigating through it like an expert. So that's yet another thing that's sort of coming to Tesla's corner that I think is not well understood. Is even in the thing that the traditional automakers are saying is their game, they're losing to the newcomer. Like forget the newcomer stuff. Then even the thing they think they're good at, they're not as good as the newcomer. It's fascinating stuff. What was your derailment there? What were you going to derail us with?
Good to have opposing views.
My derailment, when Danny mentioned the factory being the product, and it's the machine that makes the machine, I wanted to get a sense from you, Farzad, whether how you may have experienced that from the inside. I know you weren't on the manufacturing side, you were in distribution, but did it manifest in some way? Did you? Because I'm still trying to get my head around practically what that means, and how they're gearing the business towards that, right? And what's the difference between making a super efficient factory versus thinking of the factory as the product, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in my world, that terminology probably doesn't apply to it nearly as much as it would in manufacturing, because the way it's sort of thought of within the company, when you build a machine that builds a machine, it's kind of like you're investing the engineering work, talent, bandwidth into building the product, the factory, so that it's as automated as humanly possible. It's just a question of machinery automation, right? But one of the things that could correlate to the work that we were doing within Tesla is that, at least on the distribution side, is that there was a tremendous amount of time and effort put into automating all the processes and all the steps that pertain to the distribution process, and upstream and downstream of that process as well, with our own tools and know-how, without any sort of third-party help or third-party tools or consultants or whatever. It was like Tesla, essentially it became Tesla is not just the expert of EVs and battery manufacturing. Tesla needs to become the expert of distribution. So that's the sort of mentality that they hit it. And one of my really early videos, I sort of talked about how when Tesla's not afraid to take anything within the company, everything's sort of in-house as much as they humanly can. So that's the vertical integration mantra that they have, right? But it's not just a manufacturing thing; it's an everything thing, everything. And Tesla's becoming, Elon describes it as multiple small businesses in one. He talks about the AI thing. He talks about the service centers. They own the service centers, but they also own distribution. They own supply chain management. They own a lot of upstream suppliers, right? So it's like stuff like that. They're not afraid to bring in, and then within those specific processes, they invest a lot of time towards automation. So when I think about machine that builds a machine in that respect, in my head, it's just automation. And a lot of the work that I did at the company and my teams did were built around, without divulging too much, because again, I don't want to freaking get sued by Elon's lawyers showing up at my house and knocking down my front door. So I got to be careful. But we spent a lot of time creating tools that pointed teams towards things that needed attention on the fly, sort of that digital self-management-ish type process. But we did so as granularly as humanly possible, so that we removed any sort of ambiguity when you're trying to tackle the problem. And that's where automation becomes super, super powerful when it comes to digitally self-managing, is that you get as granular as humanly possible that says, yep, this thing broke. This thing broke, and we know exactly where it happened. We know who was responsible, and it goes specifically to the team that is responsible for addressing it. It's basically like exception management. I don't know if you're familiar with that sort of terminology, but we do so. We build the tools ourselves. We iterate on those tools ourselves, and then it's applied to every single step of the process. I don't know if that helps answer your question, but there's a lot of effort that goes into things that are outside of manufacturing, where Tesla is the expert, if that makes any sense.
Can you expand on the technicals? How was it working? Were you doing coding yourself, or?
Yeah, we were doing a lot of the
have software
dashboarding.
Developers embedded also in the team?
Yeah, we had software development. We had people within our team. So we had essentially dashboard folks. We had KPI folks. We had software folks. We had coding folks, and they're all sort of in their own teams per se, but they all collaborate together to bring these tools forward. So, and sometimes what we do, I gotta be really careful here, because I feel like I'm divulging a little bit too much.
Yeah, probably
maybe
we should stop pulling your time.
I'm gonna shut up.
Yeah. I'll just add to that, because I was recently thinking about it, that this part of writing software for themselves, it's a huge moat for Tesla, and it's underappreciated.
And they've been open about that, right? Elon's talked about that too on the manufacturing side, how they do a lot of that. But it's probably safe to assume that if they're going to do it on the manufacturing side, they might do it everywhere else too.
Because I know from experience that if you have a big company like Tesla now is, and you use some third-party suppliers or vendors for software, it takes ages to do any small change, and that slows down the whole business. And Tesla, with breakneck speed, if you can modify the software on the fly, it's going to be a huge advantage, and will be manifested more and more, I think.
Yeah, and it's a double whammy. It's not just internal, but then the teams internally are also extremely talented, so you get double the speed. You know what I'm saying? So that's another thing
Maybe I can provide some context of relating it to the packaging world. It's obviously very different. They're building cars instead of packaging products into bottles, but we had, even 10 years ago, we had what's called an OEE system, overall equipment efficiency system. And what we had throughout the line, so it was a high-speed bottling line. We'd have a bottle unscrambler, a high-speed filler, capper, and all rejects throughout the whole thing. Then it'd go through a labeler, induction sealer, go through an automated capper. And what we did as a maintenance crew is we went through and put at every station we had photo eyes, basically. And this was like a decade ago. So what the technology is now is far beyond that. But we'd have little photo eyes at every single station that's counting the bottles. So we know how many bottles went on. And then at every reject station, or if a cap didn't have a foil or something, we'd auto reject it off of the line. And it would all report back to the central database, and then it would report back to a dashboard that was just displayed right there for production. That would give everybody the first pass yield, like what our performance is during the day, the bottle count, how many good are coming off, and it would actually graph exactly what the performance is. And for the maintenance crew, and that's why I'm so passionate about it, is because it really is next level OEE, basically. DSM is the next step. And instead of a bunch of photo eyes, that are just counting bottles and whatnot, and then minusing rejects and all of that good stuff. It's more visual. I mean, back in the day, in a Connex camera, when we were doing, say, lot code inspections and verifying that the lot code was right, I mean, those cameras back then were like, I mean, just massive. And now we can get quality inspection cameras that are just tiny. You can put them in places that you never could back then. So I would imagine if I was there, I would have those little quality inspection cameras throughout that entire line, and I'm sure they do. But in real time, but that's what was helpful, is it would track, because we were tracking that data, we would get how efficient each piece of equipment was. So before we even had a problem with the machine, it would track it, and we would actually have a quick meeting first thing in the morning and just look at the data of, okay, the capper's at 98% efficient. It's passing 98% of it. And if that percentage dropped, it gave us insight that the thing is still working, but we would schedule maintenance on it, because we knew any sort of drop of that first pass yield, we know that, okay, well, we've got something wrong with it, and we would send a maintenance guy over to it.
Let me give you a little bit of context within test. So what you described is, thank you for sharing that insight, because I think it really paints a picture of how many different moving pieces there are when it comes to creating a process or an environment where you have a process that creates something, and then you have checks and balances and tools that help you make that process as efficient as possible. Okay. And this is where Tesla, I think, is so different from everybody else. So think about all the work you put into that right now. Right, that existing process. You probably spent a ton of time planning the process, building the process, hiring people for the process, implementing the processes, testing the processes, maybe reiterating on those processes, here and there, tweaking it, creating the tools around it to check it, verifying the tools that you created to check it, training everybody on the tools, ensuring that everybody's using the tools. Okay, so you've just spent so much time and labor to build this thing. Okay, what usually happens in a company? Usually, what happens in a company is that this thing's built out. Everybody has put in a lot of work. They're like, thank God this thing is done. They put it into place, right? And then what ends up happening? That thing is in place for 10 years because people are like, no. We spent so much time building this thing. No, we can't break it. Don't mess it up. Exactly. It's given us exactly the insight that we need. We see exactly what the numbers are, and we're tracking everybody against this. And HR is going to be pissed because you're going to change how the metrics thing, and then people are going to be upset because you're changing something on them. The magic of Tesla is that shit goes out the window the second somebody finds something better, right? Yep. That's the magic of Tesla, is that whatever work you've put in to build that entire process, if the engineers or whoever else is thinking, you know what, this entire process is stupid, let's take out 40% of it and just completely rebuild this thing, this is how we're going to do it. Tesla's like, okay, yeah, let's go. And then you have 100% of the team bought in. That's the difference. That's the difference.
That's super useful, because I was thinking, one of the challenges of automation is it can create stickiness, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it can entrench and embed. And so in and of itself, it's not sufficient, right? It makes you efficient within a very given context, but you're then locked to that context and you can't evolve. And I think what you've just highlighted there is really super useful, that nuance of willing to let go of what is, regardless of how much effort or time or automated it is fantastic culturally, right?
Just to jump in here, I think it's a step further than that. I think Tesla design stuff, just like based on interviews, like it's designed so that the process is really flexible, and it's designed that you can rapidly iterate and throw out stuff, that you don't put in something that takes a lot of time. Like even like Giga Texas is designed with a lot of space in mind. Joe Justice has talked about this. Like instead of squishing everything together, you give everything a lot more room to breathe. And then when you want to iterate on something, you can put a new one right beside it. And then you can put both of them right beside each other and have both of them going. And once one starts showing that it works, you can drop the other, and then there's no problem, right? So it allows for flexibility, rapid iteration. And as a software developer, you understand these things. You like waterfalls out, like you got to go quick, right? And it's
Yep.
just taking these same software ideas and applying them in a manufacturing like capacity. And that's what no one else is doing. And that's like, I think, what's going to come out of Tesla and out of Elon in 100 years from now, what we're going to have learned is that this is a better way. Like, this is how to apply software techniques to modern software techniques to manufacturing. And like, for anyone to think that, like, I mean, everyone's still trying to follow Toyota, like, and yeah, like he's just found something that blows that out of the water. And you can see it in the financials. I mean, it's just clear. Like, okay, so going back to the Model 3, my brother-in-law bought his in 2018, and then I got mine like early 2018, and I got mine in late 2018. He sat in my car. He was there when I got it delivered, and he was telling me how the seats felt different. Like within a year, like they had completely revamped the seats. He was like, your seats are so much more comfortable than mine. And I was like, why would they have changed that? And how could they have changed that so quickly? And that's just like one sign of like just all the little things that they can just rapidly change. And where Toyota and everyone else, they're going to be like, we got to wait a year or 3 years before we can put in one of those changes. Tesla's doing boom, boom, boom. Like every single day, the car is different. Like they're just rapidly iterating. And that is the essence of like building the machine that builds the machine. It's because they built the machine. Like that factory is so flexible that it allows the people, like whether it's automation or people driven, they can just boom, we'll take this out, we'll put this in. It's just plug and play, right? It's just like, it's modular, right? So they can just iterate.
In this sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say within that context, the culture is the machine. Like that's like, that's it. Absolutely. Truly down to the essence is the culture. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, yeah, that's a super awesome insight because like you think about, it's almost another level. It's like the machine that builds the machine that builds the machine is the people, right? Yeah. And it's the culture that like Tesla has really built. It's not just Tesla, it's SpaceX. Look, you look at like Everyday Astronaut. He just like showed that video where he went in with Elon, and like it's amazing because like no one had ever thought to rapidly iterate on rockets, right? It's just like you look at the NASA model or any other model, and they would be, they'd be spending years like just planning everything, and then they have to go through change. Like, oh my God, it must be insane to like compare like NASA versus SpaceX. I mean, it's like if you're an investor and you look beyond the surface and you look at what these two companies do, and you can even go to Neuralink and Boring company, but like you just look at all these companies and you just look at that surface level difference of like how it operates, like how the organizations operate. Like each one of these companies is a machine that builds the machine that builds the machine. And like each one of them is completely unique if you compare it to everything else in the world, except for maybe software engineering. But like, yeah, it's crazy.
Wouldn't it be fascinating to see how this works out in terms of Twitter, right? What that means for Twitter, for social media company. That will be mind blowing. So that's why I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it goes through in the end.
I think one way or another, there will be a Twitter, there will be a social media company that he creates. I think it's just a question of whether it's Twitter or if he like starts from scratch.
I think it honestly is essential, just for the fact that one thought that occurred to me the other day when I think it was watching a Farz video about Twitter or something, and the idea popped up that it just made me think. It's like, okay, well, FSD beta is obviously getting incredible, and it's getting to the point now where that's just, in my opinion, it very well could become a major weapon for those that oppose Elon to really attack FSD and prevent it from going from FSD beta to FSD alpha, and now everybody can have it. So to me, Twitter and that, the thought popped into my head is that's the way that he can get the truth out there. And because right now there is no PR department for Tesla. So in a way,
He is the PR department.
ensuring that it's freedom of speech, ensuring that we can all voice our opinion. There's your PR department. So you have all this FUD coming from the government or whoever wants to attack it for whatever agenda. You can say, well, that's nice you feel that way, but here's the facts. Here's all the data, and now you can decide how you feel about it.
I'm not sure that it helps too much. I mean, to be honest, like if he owns Twitter versus not owning Twitter, he still has a voice there. It's not like they're gonna like ban him or anything.
A lot of people thought they would never ban Trump either. I can't believe actually. I mean, like love him or hate him, like the fact that a president of the United States was banned. A president of the United States was banned. That's actually, I don't want to get political here, but if he can get banned, why can't Elon?
Well, yeah.
But just a thought.
Trump was a little bit out of the normal of the spectrum for presidents. I think that's what the response is. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think the question of Twitter and now Elon and his teams taking that on, I couldn't agree more, Kuba, with your statement, because I think that inherently is going to be such a it's a disruption. It's yet another disruption to an industry or whatever you want to call it, where somebody who approaches things in a very unorthodox manner, because no one else has done it that way before, and that's why it's unorthodox, is now tackling a subject matter that is extremely public, right? Like literally everybody knows what social media is. Not everybody knows about electric vehicles, and sort of rockets and stuff. Everybody knows what social media is. So like his exposure is going to become 100% essentially of the population that would be aware of who Elon Musk is versus maybe like, I don't know, 5% or 10%, because not everybody can afford an electric car and not everyone's thinking about electric cars all the time, right? Whereas I think social media is a very different story, because with the advent of the smartphone, everybody is on their smartphone every single day. And if a specific platform is created that could cater to the needs of what people would be looking to do on a social media platform on a daily basis, like say, I don't know if you guys caught this in the All In podcast, I think it was the All In podcast, where he talked about, I think it was WeChat. Is that the one of the apps? Yeah, where he talked about how sort of WeChat is like the everything thing. You get news, video, you can talk to people, you can transfer money, right? And he talked about how either Twitter or something else could eventually become that thing for the United States. My understanding is that every single person in China uses WeChat. That's my understanding. I don't know if that's true or not, but like it's kind of like a text messaging app that has a bunch of other things. So I think if he's able to bring that to the United States and maybe globally, I think everyone's going to be exposed. A large percentage of the population is going to be exposed to the disruptive, innovative nature of his services and products versus a small percentage of the population. So like right now, 1% of the car market in the United States, or maybe less or more, buys Teslas, and maybe 1.5 to 2% of the population has experienced a Tesla, like truly has experienced a Tesla and an Elon Musk product. Whereas now with Twitter, if he buys it, potentially 100% of the population could be exposed to an Elon Musk product and an Elon Musk innovative thing. So I wonder if how is that going to transform the discourse around is that going to help or hurt? You know what I'm saying? So it's going to be very interesting to see. Just wanted to add my 2 cents there.
I think it's brilliant. Honestly, what you're saying there is because, I mean, how many of us, even when we were introducing ourselves, what brought us to Elon? Like, we were fascinated with rockets, and then it was like, this is absolutely brilliant. What else does this guy do? Oh, there's this thing called Tesla. And same thing goes for Twitter or whatever social media company it becomes. I mean, same concept. It's like, this is absolutely brilliant. I love how this works. It's engineered very well. What else does Elon do? What else? What other capabilities, if they haven't? I mean, because there is still quite a bit, surprisingly enough, there's quite a bit of people that have never even heard of Elon, believe it or not.
But I think if you look at his number of Twitter followers. I think it's accelerated. I haven't really looked at the graphs, but just anecdotally looking at the numbers, it feels like it's accelerated since Twitter, since this whole thing with Twitter started happening. So that very much talks to the point you're making, Farzad, in essence.
Yeah, I was literally pulling up his follower count. He's at 94.2 million now. I think before the Twitter purchase, it was like in the 80s, if I remember correctly.
So, yeah.
So I think that's accurate. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Twitter stuff from anybody?
Do you think that it's really a viable option to start from scratch? It will be a pain to build a user base. It might cost $1 billion, but how long and how much money you have to spend to attract as many people as you already have?
I think that's exactly. Often people say it's $1 billion. You technically, sure, you can get it done, and I'm sure he'll have no issue doing it in pretty quickly. But I assume the reason he's going the Twitter route is precisely, I mean, the network effects, like the effort.
That's why he's so bothered with the bots percentage, right?
Yeah,
because he's really paying for users.
Yeah, exactly. He's paying for users and the network effects. It's really tough to shift people over to something new, and risky, right? Because you really don't know. I mean, it's not like there's that much precedent for that type of thing to know that who's really done it successfully, like taken a whole dominant social network and shifted everyone across to something new.
Well, I mean, there was Friendster, then MySpace, and then Facebook.
Yeah,
right?
but they were at early stage though, right? The market was still very open. The network effects weren't that dominant, right? So you're right, but I think that the field was still open. There were so many new users in proportion to the existing users at that point, that if you could channel the flow of new users, you'd be okay with something new if it was sufficiently compelling. Whereas with Twitter, it's not about channeling the flow of new users, but uprooting habits and of what's already entrenched.
Sure.
Yeah, it actually surprised me that he back before he actually bought Twitter, back when he was just running the poll, if you remember. I thought very, very much so that he probably wouldn't, just because that didn't seem like the Elon way. Like if you've heard some of his early interviews, that's one thing that he says a lot about Tesla is he's like, we definitely didn't start it the way that we should have. Like we shouldn't have bought that company and make that work, the existing platform, because we didn't use any of that. Like that was all just like a oops. So like from there is just any new things. It's like he starts from first principles and just builds it from there. So I just figured, I was like, well, guessing he'll do the same thing with this, but you're right. I would say that's probably the main reason. That's the main attraction, I would say, is just the user, how many users are on there. That's what he's actually buying.
It just occurred to me, I think that he'll actually do it with Twitter as well, but will be underneath, and we won't know this, but when he takes over Twitter after a year or two, the whole of the code will be new.
Yeah.
Just the user base will be left, and you'll actually have a new software platform underneath that just happens to be called Twitter still and use the same user base.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
It's funny. AC propulsion is Twitter, or Twitter is AC propulsion.
Yeah.
Yep. Amen, brother.
Sorry to interrupt
to that end, I do have a question because part of me in my mind, like, he did tweet what seems to be quite a compelling set of things that Twitter will become about technically, right?
Yeah.
In terms of cybersecurity, server infrastructure, like really hardcore technology. And part of me is thinking, are the synergies between, like, it allows him to really push the boundaries in terms of hardcore tech on the Twitter side in a way that that type of investment may not be justified on the Tesla side, or like, he has to spend money on cybersecurity with Tesla, right? But if we look at what Twitter needs to do, maybe it's next level, right?
Yeah.
And the question then is, can that benefit SpaceX and can it benefit Tesla? And the question is, to what extent is there collaboration between the businesses at the moment. I mean, from what I've understood, it happens to a limited degree. Like, so for example, between SpaceX and Tesla on the material side, there's a team that seems to but what are your thoughts on that? And everyone else's?
That's a really good question. I think there's obviously going to be some level of shared talent, expertise, and learnings between all the companies, because that already happens today. So I think it's fair to assume. It's almost like, okay, if you think about it from a first principles perspective, if you have all this talent, I just got to stop saying first principles, because it's becoming like a buzzword, like freaking Web3 and all that shit. So I'm just going to say, if you think about it, if you have all this talent under your umbrella, and all this knowledge under your umbrella, and there's an obvious opportunity for you to share that and reallocate part of it so that it helps you move towards your goal faster, why wouldn't you do it, right? Whereas before, I think say in a traditional business environment, you might have these like arbitrary or made up walls that are either HR driven or maybe like culture driven that say, well, no, you shouldn't do that because you're going to piss off somebody if you start working on this in the other company. You should just focus on what you're doing, kind of thing, right? Whereas Elon's like, okay, well, I mean, I have all this talented people and this person could bring value to this side of the house. Why wouldn't we bring him over and have him work on this stuff, right? We saw that all the time. We saw that within the company, within departments all the time. Like we would work on stuff that has nothing to do with distribution because we felt like it would help. Like I worked on some packaging stuff while I was in distribution, but packaging was one of my big focuses. It's so that shared experience within the companies exists. The shared experience and knowledge and tools exist between companies. And so if Twitter becomes, if it's under his umbrella, I don't see why that wouldn't be. And I'm trying to think through some of like what are the obvious things that Tesla and SpaceX could pass on to Twitter from like a tool or knowledge perspective. I think the AI stuff from the Tesla side probably makes the most sense in some way. I don't know how exactly yet, but there's got to be something. So I'm curious to hear everyone else's thoughts.
It sounds like the culture is the most important thing.
Exactly.
Yep.
100%. And it goes back to this whole thing. Like a lot of people, I think, view Tesla and SpaceX and all these companies as engineering marvels. I view them as an innovation on how you bring people together to solve problems at the core. The way I view these companies, it's not, the engineering is brilliant, but it's a people thing. It's a culture thing. 100% it's a culture thing. But I'll pass the mic on to other people.
I know there was one interview that I saw. I know there's at least a few people that Elon's actually used it as a recruiting tool. Like, and that's how he gets the best of the best. Is there have been some engineers that Tesla or SpaceX have been going after, and the only reason that the deciding factor for them is like, as long as I can work on rockets and cars, I'm there. And I know there's at least a few engineers there that literally work. They've got it set up to where they can work at SpaceX and Tesla.
Yeah, and in terms of what Tesla and SpaceX can bring to Twitter, certainly the software engineering talent. And I think also that the software engineers are overrepresented on Twitter, and we use Twitter more than the general population. So I think that's why many of the current software devs from Tesla and SpaceX might be interested if they are bored. I don't know if it's possible to be bored at Tesla, but from my experience, software devs at some point, they look for new opportunities and new areas to grow, and maybe new domains as well. So it'll be great to have an offer for them on the table. You can go work on Twitter, the tool that you've been using for years and you like to use.
It will be a bit of sabbatical for them. It's like, let's go to Twitter for a sabbatical, right?
Yes. Yes.
That's true. I think what's also interesting too is being on YouTube and becoming a YouTuber in the last few months here and using this platform. YouTube has no competition. It has zero competition. How much could Twitter become that new sort of maybe competing platform to YouTube with media, right? And then you think about how does that extrapolate out to Tesla in the long term? Could Twitter or whatever, new Twitter, whatever, to Kuba's point of in about 2 years' time, we're probably going to have new code anyway, and it's just we're purchasing it for the sake of the people. At what point is new Twitter become the multimedia platform for all full self-driving Teslas, where you watch your entertainment on this new Twitter, you maybe video chat with people on this new Twitter. I don't know. Could that be more of a long-term vision for that as well, where instead of partnering with Apple or something, you just turn Twitter into that thing, and then your user base starts using that, and then you have an ecosystem built around a smartphone where you use new Twitter, your car where you use new Twitter. So I'm wondering if how much of that thought process in purchasing Twitter is also going down that route, where it's sort of that becomes that one-stop shop for everything entertainment, communications, so on and so forth.
Your Optimus bot control, you communicate through Twitter. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
You could. Why not?
Yeah.
No, for real. Why not? Yeah, why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
40 chess.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I do think getting into the messaging space, definitely, like, a replacement for WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram. I'm not sure what's the most popular in the US, but in South Africa, WhatsApp is what dominates. Whether he can get Twitter to move into that space would be very, very interesting.
Yeah. We're approaching an hour and 15. Should we do one more topic and then close out the forum? You guys comfortable with that?
I'm here as long as you want to be here, brother man.
All right, we're here for 12 hours. How about that? I'll do it.
Break out the energy drinks. Let's do this.
Go for it, Kuba.
I wanted to go with one follow-up for this the discussion of the culture. That is the like another mode, it seems, and maybe even the strongest one. But because it seems unimaginable to me that it will go away. But if we were to do this thought experiment and figure out what would have to happen for the Tesla culture and SpaceX culture to start breaking down, and because we have to keep really close attention on it, right? Because that would be a really bad sign for us as investors. But can you think of anything that apparently growing the company to the size of 100,000 plus people is not it,
right?
Thankfully,
yeah.
I was a bit afraid that maybe as they move into Germany, because Germans are really special type of people, where they like the order and they don't like to move in this haphazard, chaotic way, possibly. But yeah. I think they still picked the right kind of Germans there to work that are a culture fit for Tesla, it seems. So what else might happen? What do you think? Have you been thinking about it at all?
I have. That's a super good question. So the way I view it is that the reason why the culture exists is because there is a mission that is clear and obviously bigger than the individual. So that's step number one, right? So there's a mission so while I work there, the reason why that culture works is because, like we talked about, having to change constantly on things that you've invested a ton of time in is not an inherently human thing to do, because human beings like to avoid pain. We like to just, why would you self-inflict pain if you have something that works already? There's a small percentage of people that are constantly looking for change, but the huge majority of the human population, I would argue, are not really comfortable with pain that much, and constant change on things that you've invested a ton of time in is painful. I've led teams. I know how hard it is to get people to change the smallest things, especially in companies that don't have a mission and a leader or leadership structure that helps you facilitate that sort of culture. Okay, so the reason why Tesla is able to change as much as it can, and why it has a culture of innovation and moving forward, and why they have people that are willing to do that, is because there's a mission that all of us can look towards to that we know this is for a very important reason. We're not just changing something to make our boss happy. We're changing happy so that we're faster towards getting more cars out the door so that we can advance humanity towards a self-sustaining future. There's a very clear pathway to that, even in distribution. Right? If my team does a really good job, more customers will leave the service center happy and recommend the car to their friends, which will help the adoption of Teslas and sustainable transport. So it's a very clear link to those things, okay? I think once that mission becomes less clear and less maybe less important over time, and it's not shifted to something that is as important or has the same sort of weight, I think that's when we can start asking the question is, okay, is Tesla starting to lose a very crucial advantage that they have over everything else that feeds the entirety of all the other moats that they have, which is that culture, right?
Farz, sorry to interrupt, man. I do have a question around that. Even if that mission still prevails, right? The question is, it's what you describe holds true if senior managers enact that mission, right?
That's correct.
I can see a situation where the mission in principle holds true, but you start getting managers and executives who aren't true to it and start favoring their own agenda. And then that starts cascading down, right?
Yes.
What prevents that from happening? Is it purely Elon's presence at the top? Or is there some other way of inoculating against that kind of pernicious political agenda kicking in, and the mission just remains a cover?
That's a really good question. I think Elon at the top is definitely a percentage of it for sure. For sure. I don't know if it's 50% or 80% or 30%, but I think Elon being at the top is definitely a percentage of it. The only reason why I hesitate and say that he's the only reason why is because I've encountered many leaders and people managers and folks that were driving sort of initiatives and things that we're working on where Elon was never brought up. It was like, this is really, like, we got to get this done. This is super important. Like, this is very, very important. So there's some sort of culture that has been created where a lot of the leadership structures have also bought into that mission. But it obviously all started because Elon surrounded himself with people that were like-minded. And then he was, I think, able to put that sort of mindset into his leadership group, which has permeated the rest of the organization, right? So then the question becomes, if Elon leaves, whenever that happens, for whatever reason, if he's not involved in the company whatsoever. And I think that as long as Elon is involved in the company and in any sort of way, shape, or form, I'm confident that culture exists because I think when he gets a whiff of that shit gets cleaned up immediately. I really do think it's that sort of thing. But as soon as Elon, say, becomes 0% involved in Tesla, the question becomes, how strong is the leadership structure that he's created around himself in upholding those values? And then who or whom become the new voices to ensure, and the new leaders to ensure that that sort of behavior continues in the company, and that all leadership is continually tested and measured upon those values, right? So to me, Elon being there 100% guarantees that this culture survives. I think if Elon leaves today, I think this culture survives for, say, yet another generation of leadership at the executive level and at the managerial level. So let's say that those folks will last anywhere between 5 to 10 years, okay? But then that second generation is when I start sort of being like, okay, but I'm not sure at that point, because then human nature starts to take over, right? So culture for me for the next 10 years, I'm confident that it's going to be great. But then after that 10-year mark, I think that's when we can start asking those questions. It's a really good question. And it's by far the most important signal, in my opinion, to ensure that Tesla's heading towards that. It still has that acceleration towards their end goal. As soon as you remove that culture aspect, it starts reducing, right? The acceleration comes down. Does that help?
And I would just say, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's important to realize that Tesla, SpaceX, they're not immune to political issues. Like, there are definitely people that are always going to be there that are going to be like, it's not going to be people, but like, there's going to be instances where politics for a single person, like, gets in the way of progress or whatever. But I think overall, like, having that culture where, like, people understand that happens and that you can react to it. I mean,
it's self-correcting.
I knew someone who was,
it's self-correcting. Yeah.
I knew someone who was at SpaceX, and he was complaining. He worked down there in Hawthorne, and he was complaining that it was getting very political. And like, looking back at that from, my modern lens of like SpaceX or of these companies, I mean, it's clear that it's not perfect. And like, there's other issues that have been arising out of these companies. But you can't run like these large corporations with minimal, like Elon doesn't oversee all these companies on a day-to-day basis, right? He's relying on people who are already there to like take care of, like, to run these businesses, so that he's not, like he can run 5 businesses. So I think to a degree, a lot of that stuff is already built in. It's just like he's kind of like jumping from haystack to haystack, and like, okay, today I can focus on this, today I can focus on this. And he's just trying to run things from an engineering perspective, and then relying on the sort of cultures that he's already set up to like kind of move in the right direction, I guess.
I would put it in a different way too. As long as Tesla can throw up manufacturing plants in less than 2 years, the culture's fine. Because you need really fucking good culture to do that. Talk about bureaucracy, right? So as long as that continues to happen, we're fine.
Yeah.
But it honestly reminds me of the, Farz would know this better than most, but obviously it got leaked out or whatnot. But what did they call it? The employee non-contract contract or something like that.
The anti-handbook.
That's it. In there, it's just straight up common sense, and it's like, okay, this is what we do. This is our mission. If you're on board, great. It's great to have you. If you're not, the way I interpret it is, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Like, we're here on a mission, and if you want to be a part of it, you're a part of it, and we're glad to have you. If you're not a part of it, get out.
That's 100% right. Any other comments around that?
Yeah, so I think, culture is definitely sticky, right? And that's why it's hard to change. I suspect it's more sticky on the bad than it is on the good. I think it's probably harder to change a bad culture into a good one than because I suppose as humans, we'll naturally descend into chaos, right? You have to put more effort to maintain order and to make things work, because the default is descending into chaos. But I still think there's a stickiness with the good, right? You can see all the positive feedback cycles that are there. You've got good managers; they'll recruit good people, so I think. It resonates what you say, that for the next 10 years there's enough momentum and stickiness that it will continue. And I suspect it's something like, if we're worried about it, I'm sure Elon is worried about it, right? He thinks 10 years ahead, so I'm sure he's got some things up his sleeve for that period, right?
I think ensuring that there is a percentage of population that is inspired in some way by the missions that these companies are taking on will, I think, maximize the chances of the culture continuing to be good. And that's why I think the mission is so important, because ultimately, if you talk about a lot of the people that work at Tesla, and I've talked to a lot of them, fortunately, because I worked there for so long, very, very few people are there for the money. Everyone's there for the mission. Everyone is there. When I say everyone, I mean a large majority of the workers. So let me just rephrase that. 90% plus of the workforce at Tesla at any given time is fully bought into working as hard as they can to move that mission forward. So that's why it kind of goes back to the mission as well. So it's not just a leader at the top to ensure that people are constantly self-correcting, and that there is a leadership structure that's constantly self-correcting when there is these things that test the culture system. But then there's also that overarching thing that all of us can look towards and be like, okay, but this is why it's important. This is why we're doing it, because it sucks. Working really hard sucks. It hurts. It hurts. So having that big reason why is important. And then of course, as you achieve that mission, you get rewarded. The stock market or whatever other systems you have that are built that allow you to capitalize on the value that you're bringing start to materialize. That becomes yet another reason why it's good working there, because you also make a lot of money. If you're getting paid a lot in stock, and you have everyone at Tesla that works full time receives some sort of stock grant at some point, they become even more sold on the fact that what they're doing is important, And so I think what's very interesting to watch as well is that as the stock price continues to appreciate over time, which, I think all of us are somewhat confident or very confident that it will, that's also going to be a tool that not only reaffirms that the culture aspect is good, but hey, like what you're doing is also being rewarded by the markets and rewarded by those that want to have a piece of the pie that you're building, I think that's also another variable.
And it's in those times that you're uncomfortable that you learn the most. Like that's I think why Tesla's so brilliant and they put their people in these positions and give them so much trust. It's in those times that you do fail, and it's in those times that you are the most uncomfortable that you come out stronger. Like once you beat it, you're much stronger afterwards. I mean, the saying goes, be comfortable being uncomfortable. And after a while, in a weird, twisted way, you almost crave it. Like I'm sure the Tesla people are very
sick in their head. Yes.
No, but like they just the like if it wasn't that way, they probably think something was weird at this point. Like we got to move quick. We got to innovate. And the only way to do that is to be comfortable being uncomfortable and just get it done.
To that end, Farzad, have you seen many cases of people burning out or just getting overloaded? And is there a self-correcting mechanism for that as well?
That's a really good question. I've definitely seen a percentage of the workforce definitely get burned out for sure. I mean, I think really the thing that I'm trying to put a percentage on it. I mean, I would say like at any given time, like maybe 5% of the workforce is probably burnt out. Like burnt out, what I mean about it is like there's a lot of stuff going on. They're working really hard to get it done. They keep hitting walls, and it's like you have to keep pushing because a lot of these problems are just tough to solve, and you have to iterate a lot. So at any given time, probably 5% of the workforce is burnt out. But what Tesla does really well is that at least from all the organizations that I was exposed to, people are encouraged to like, okay, you're burnt out, go home, dude. Like take some time off, however long you need. Go home, take time off, come back fresh. Try to come back
and
fresh.
The camaraderie as well, I think.
100%.
You can count on people to help you, right?
Exactly. That was going to be my next thing too. Is that while that person's not there, people will rally because they know it's important. There was a period of time at the facility that I worked at where the leader was on leave for like 2 to 3 months. And this was a facility that's about almost 100 people. And I was, next in command. And then I've never run a warehouse before. I stepped in and I ran the warehouse for 3 months, and we still put in a bunch of different changes. Usually what would happen in that scenario is, second in command comes in, and at a usual company, I think the direction would be, okay, just make sure everything's running smoothly, make sure, nothing breaks apart, make sure that it's into one piece when I come back. But at Tesla, you're still expected to move the facility forward. You're still expected to bring stuff to the table. So it's almost like if somebody steps out, when they come back, it's going to be better than when they left, right? And so that's the sort of mentality we all had. So, and my thing was like, okay, he's not here for the next 3 months. He needs to take some time, but we're still going to implement changes. And we implemented some pretty big changes that are unorthodox in an environment where somebody that comes in would usually just make sure that everything runs well. We still moved it forward. And then when he came back, he had to get caught up on all the different changes we made, So that sort of mentality exists through the entire company from what I saw from the organizations that I was exposed to. But yeah. Okay. Any closing comments from the team?
Thank you.
Okay.
We really appreciate it.
Of course.
I'm super stoked about Optimus. I can say that.
Yes.
I'm super stoked about AI Day coming up and learning more about that. I honestly, just from an automation background, it'll be, I have no doubt that it can get it done. What we can do with robots now with vision and literally taking bottles off of a line at 400 bottles a minute with a robot, just taking a snap picture, knowing exactly where that's at, get it off, move it where it needs to go. I have no doubt that Optimus will be doing, I honestly see it a lot like FSD beta. They'll get it started on basic tasks of just moving parts around, and then they'll innovate and build upon it. And but I think we'll all be surprised seeing it move sooner than later.
From my side, Farzad, someone on the chat, on the Discord chat, used the term super fan, which is an interesting one. And so the extent we are super fans, it can be a very lonely thing, because you're always the odd one out, always talking about Tesla and always knowing a lot more than everyone else. And it's hard to find like-minded people within your immediate proximity. And so it's fantastic to just have an opportunity to be in an environment, in a context where, we can share at this level. So, and whilst there are a lot of YouTubers out there doing wonderful things, I think creating a community that can interact at a broader level like this is fantastic. So thank you very much for making the step.
Yeah,
that's really kind. Thank you.
Thanks for putting a trust in us. I think we delivered. At least I know myself.
I had a blast. I thought it was great.
Yeah, me too.
I hope you get more than 5 views.
Watch this be my biggest video.
That would be awesome.
Sorry, Kuba, go ahead.
I have a lot of new connections in my brain after this chat. A lot of light bulbs went out, and I'm just hoping that your viewers will also enjoy it.
Thank you. No, that's the entire point of these discussions, and I'm so happy you said that, because I think what's really cool about having a forum like this is, we've never met each other before in this forum, but I think having this shared experience and hopefully a very open discussion forum where you guys feel comfortable sharing those ideas is ultimately my goal. And I think this went, I thought it was going to be a really good exercise, and I think it went better than I expected, because the flow of information I think was even more smooth than I expected. And of course, it's not going to be like as clear as in person, obviously, but I still feel like we were able to sort of connect and share ideas in a pretty good way. So no, thank you guys for accepting the invitation of coming on, and I thought it was a great discussion. And hopefully, like you said, hopefully, when you go to bed tonight and you wake up, there's like a bunch of like new things that your subconscious has figured out that maybe has put into your conscious mind, or even before you go to bed. And for the viewers as well, I hope this was an engaging conversation for y'all. And ultimately, I think the message here from my end is like, I really want to continue creating ways for us to share ideas as openly as humanly possible. And so if you're somebody that wants to add to the discussion in the comments, feel free to do so. And then in the future, I'll look to add, maybe we'll do like a rotating, as folks on my Patreon channel are comfortable. Maybe we'll have rotating channels. And of course, anybody that wants to come back is more than welcome to come back. But I would love to have a variety. So again, thank you guys for supporting the channel. Love you guys very much. Honestly, I'm super, super humbled. And thank you. And then we'll see you on the next installment of this cool little thing we've started. So thank you all very much. And we'll see you later.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Take care, guys.
Y'all stay on.
Yes.
Y'all stay on. Yeah.